Instead of brands categorizing their clothes as menswear, womenswear, or unisex, it should just be categorized as body conscious or relaxed fit, so it lets the wearer decide what suits them, instead of prescribing certain styles via some arbitrary notion of femininity versus masculinity. If more progressive brands are truly trying to distance themselves from cis normativity slash the gender binary, this just seems like a logical step forward. Also, offering an in-house tailoring service just seems like good business sense, especially if you want to move fashion in a genderless direction. I don't know why it's only certain elite brands that have implemented this in their business. So I agree with most of it. The only part I don't agree with is that we should take away, let's say, like femininity or masculinity or menswear, womenswear, or, that kind of side completely from fashion. Why do I say that? Once again, I talk about this all the time, but like men typically have broader shoulders than women. So if you were to, because you need to remember, ready to wear, how you make ready to wear garments is you take the average measurement of the average person in society, and then you turn that into a pattern, and then you use that pattern to kind of grade kind of the average size, and you grade it up or down. So that being said, that's why, you would have things fitting even worse if like you didn't do that. Because men have broader shoulders, so you have to take into account, okay, the average man's broad shoulders, and you put that into the, standard ready-to-wear sizing and stuff like that. If you remove all of that, you have someone like me with really broad, masculine, manly shoulders that doesn't fit into anything because you're trying to make everything genderless without actually, taking into account the actual biological realities of certain people's bodies. So I think that side of things, you can't completely remove that. However, branding wise, I definitely agree. There are certain garments where it's just a hoodie. Anyone can wear a hoodie. It doesn't need to be like, a hoodie doesn't need to be characterized in menswear or women's wear, whatever. It should just be genderless. It's literally just a hoodie. So there are definitely a lot of pieces that are like that. I mean, trousers are like that. I mean, maybe trousers could be less gendered and more about maybe these are accommodating for people with bigger thighs or bigger hips, smaller hips, whatever. So that's definitely a thing. I do think that a lot of things need to be less gendered, especially things that, once again, there's no biological understanding that you need to have for the differences in body shapes between, let's say, men and women. For example, bags. Bags should not be gendered. Bags are always gendered. I feel like a big reason why a lot of people have been socialized to think these things are for men or these things are for women or whatever is because things like bags are gendered. Like, everyone should be able to wear bags. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It's literally just a bag. It doesn't matter your body proportions. Everyone can wear a bag. Why is it gendered? Why are certain bags in the women's section? Why are certain bags in the men's section? We need to work on just normalizing just bags in general. It's just a thing that you use to carry things. So I always find the gendering of bags really odd. Other accessories too, like wire belts, gendered, stuff like that is odd. But once again, I do think that certain things need to be gendered. I think not gendering things actually does people a disservice. I'll give you an example. I'm a big sports enthusiast. I used to play sports at a really high level, like really, really high level. So I know a lot about sports. And even now, I'm a big sports fan. I follow a lot of sports. Now, Nike, not too recently, someone in the comments is saying gendering fragrance is really stupid. I totally agree. So stupid to gender. It's just a smell. But anyway, so Nike recently has started doing a lot of research on making football boots specifically for women and taking into account the shape of women's feet, because they did all this research and found that, because obviously like female sports is becoming really big, which I'm a big fan of. I'm a big fan of a lot of women's sports. So they found through their research that a lot of female athletes were getting injured just wearing like the generic football boots, because these are made for men, marketed towards men, designed for men. So it doesn't take into account the hip ratio, the foot shape of women. So they would have like crazy injuries like ACL tears, MCL tears, ankle injuries, just because the football boots weren't made to the anatomy of a woman, right? So Nike did all this research. They started launching boots for women specifically. And now female football athletes have less injuries statistically because they made boots specifically for the biology of a woman. So once again, I don't think you can take biology and completely like throw it in the dustbin, because I don't think that actually isn't good for anyone. I think that would mean that women are more injured, and bringing that into clothing, it just means that less things would actually fit people. So I think you have to have that, but there are, like I've said, certain aspects where things just don't need to be gendered. Like, why are they gendered? Especially if something is like, there are certain silhouettes that is just so wide. Like, if trousers are just so wide, it doesn't need to be gendered, because that doesn't take into account anyone's body type or body shape. It's just, they're so wide, anyone can wear them. So those kind of things don't really need to be gendered, for example. So I think it just depends. I think being able to mend and alter your own clothes says more about your dedication to clothes as an art form than the amount of pieces you own or even the amount of fashion history you know. Let me see some of the replies. Two different things, unless you add willingness to get something mended / utilize a tailor for those who don't sew / have time themselves. So, okay, interesting. This is an interesting take. It definitely is hot. I think this is a take that I've heard quite a lot of people have in fashion, this idea that, if you can't make or alter your own clothes, then it means you're not as interested in fashion. I think it depends. I mean, me personally, I know how to make clothes, but in a different way. So I normally tell people that I don't know how to use a sewing machine, because I actually don't. I've never learned. I plan on learning at some point, but I don't. But I used to be a pattern maker, and that confuses people, because people are like, how could you possibly be a pattern maker and like you didn't really extend those skills into, like using a sewing machine? But you guys need to remember, I learned to sew when I lived in Nigeria. And when I lived in Nigeria, for most of it, there wasn't really any internet. For 2 years, I lived in, a village. There wasn't any equipment. So when I learned to sew, I actually learned to hand sew. So I can make clothing via hand sewing. It would just take too long and it's not efficient for my time anymore, which is why it doesn't make sense for me to make clothes. But I don't know if I agree that if you can't mend clothing, even though I can, so I'm not even talking about myself or trying to defend myself, but I don't think that's true. I think there are people that are very knowledgeable and have a deep passion of fragrances, but they're not perfumers and they don't know how to make their own fragrances. Or there are people that own a car collection and they are car fanatics. They know about every kind of engine, when engines changed. You get the Porsche fans that are like, is it air cooled or water cooled? Is it, what era? These people are obsessed with these things and they don't make the cars. Like, they're not engineers, right? They're just car enthusiasts. I don't think that, being able to make something is the only way to show that you're, dedicated in a way. But I do agree in a sense that it says something about your dedication to clothing, that you've gone, as far as learning how to make your own clothes. Because the reason why this is very important, especially for journalists, I find it really weird that most journalists in fashion have never made clothing before. They don't know how to hand sew or make patterns or anything, because it confuses me. How could you possibly know what a well-constructed garment looks like? I guess you can build a taste for that over the years of just being around fashion, but if you don't really make clothing, you don't truly know, you don't truly understand that. So how would you possibly know that? And it's kind of weird that a lot of journalists are in that position where they talk about clothing, but they don't even know really have any sense of like how things are made properly. Kind of strange. But yeah, so I disagree and agree to an extent. This is a good point though, saying that many car lovers know how to fix their car. I think it depends. Because what do we call fixing your car? Is fixing your car changing a tire? Is fixing your car... Most people, when they fix their car, they're not doing things like, actually detaching the whole car down to its components to see like what's wrong with the engine and stuff like that. They normally take that to mechanics. The people I know that fix their own car to that extent just happen to be mechanics and they're car enthusiasts as well. So I don't really know about this day. I don't really know. I don't think that not being able to mend your clothing means that you're not that dedicated to fashion. I don't really know. Even though it's not really that hard to learn how to mend clothing, to be fair. But yeah, I don't really know that to be true. I definitely think it's beneficial, and it does say a lot about, your dedication to fashion if you do know how to alter and mend clothing. But yeah, I love cars, don't have the tools to fix my own car. Part of it is also just like other things too. You know what I mean? Angerfish says, I do think there is something to be said about engaging with something as a craft versus as a consumer. That's a good point, to be honest. That definitely is a good point. For sure, for sure. But yeah, I semi-agree with this take, to be fair. Al says, you definitely know more about clothes, not sure about fashion. Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Al, because being able to make clothes doesn't mean that you know how the fashion industry works. How do we know that? Most fashion designers don't have a damn clue about running a fashion business. So that tells you everything you need to know. So yeah, being into fashion as an industry and a thing, it's totally different to, you know, more knowing about clothes and construction of things and how to make a garment, how to mend a garment, those things. Yeah, those are two different things. For sure. Those are two different things. Definitely. When it comes to wearing clothes, fit is more important than everything else. I guess, to an extent. I think, yes. I think most people don't consider fit when they wear clothes, or I don't think most people have a strong understanding of, like, I don't know, how clothing is supposed to fit in that sense. However, not everything is intended to fit the way that, you know, the rules would dictate things are supposed to fit perfectly, right? Like, rules dictate that, you know, when you wear something, the shoulders should fit perfectly here, and, you know, the sleeves should fit, like, but maybe you're into avant-garde fashion and you're wearing jackets that, you know, deliberately constrict your shoulders to change how the silhouette looks. So I think that in certain conversations, if someone's just like generically trying to find garments that fit nicely and garments they can wear that they look nice in most of the time, then yes, fit is very important. However, not everyone wants to dress like that. Some people are really artsy and really avant-garde, and they want to wear things that deliberately fit very obviously badly because it's interesting and it changes the silhouette of how the garment looks. So I think both things can be true at once, for sure. Let's see. Yeah, exactly what Culture is saying. It really depends on the intention of the designer wearer. But why I agree with the take is if I was to guess, majority of people in the world aren't like really artsy or don't have any like avant-garde intention when they wear clothing. The stuff just fits bad. So that's why I can agree with it. But I just want to add the extra context that not every single person that wears clothing, you know, only wants things to fit in the sense of like how you would deem things to fit nicely by the rules that we deem as, you know, that fits nicely. I don't think everyone has that intention, but for the most part, people do. Yeah, fit is overrated in fashion circles because most people don't care about fit. Fairs. Let's see. So let's see what this next hot take is. China will become a fashion leader in the next 10 years, just as it is with every other sector: phones and electronics, EVs, medicine. It's already been a manufacturing hub for the rest of the fashion world. The homegrown talent is off the charts. The global social media is clearly trending favorably toward China with Red Note, etc. And while it will be a slower process, I think luxury consumers for whom brand name and price are more important than quality or innovation will also start to associate luxury with China more and more as Europe and the US basically disintegrate before our eyes. I think it's only because when I see what brands are doing the most innovative things in fashion, they're coming from Africa. Like I mentioned Tebe Magugu. I'm such a big fan of Tebe Magugu. Lagos-based program from Nigeria, like insane stuff, like research into indigo dyes, like cultural practices in West Africa. It's insane. You know, like Japanese designers, like brands like Anne Rilige. You know, so yeah, I think the most interesting stuff is actually happening in Asia and Africa and places like that. I think a lot of the brands in especially France are so boring, especially the top luxury brands. So uninteresting. They're not really pushing things forward. There's not much development. So I think in terms of, you know, China becoming a fashion leader, I think it's only right. I think once China gets over the stigma of made in China equals bad, which if you guys watch this live stream, you would know that's not true. Like, there are high quality garments that are made in China. There are mid-tier quality garments made in China and also low quality garments made in China. So you can find garments in China better made than garments made in Italy. Like, I don't know why people don't understand that, but that's just, it is what it is. That's just fact. So yeah, I can see a world in which China is a global fashion leader. Like, not just in terms of manufacturing, which they are now, but also in terms of like brands, like luxury brands, innovation. I don't really think that's a hot take. I can see fashion going in that direction, to be honest. Let's see. Someone says, China being a fashion leader will never happen. People are too racist. Maybe, because I definitely think that part of the reason why people think that only low quality things are made in China is definitely rooted in like a level of like racism. It's like this whole, how could they possibly make things that are better than France or Italy? There's like a certain level of elitism there, which is funny because have you seen the infrastructure that's in China? Like, it's insane. But yeah. But no, I definitely think even with the elitism and the racism, I still think that it'll just get to a point where people can't ignore it. It'll just get to that stage. Right, Siobhan says, China owns the production, which means they own the pattern work, really. Almost every US pattern maker job is China now, and it's been that way for a long time. Yeah, exactly, which is why I feel like China is just going to run everything to the point where you can't actually argue about China being, you know, like high quality, because it'll just be like, bro, all the expertise is there at a certain point. Like, even people that want to disagree will not be able to disagree. The 2010s/2020s don't have their own unique style that actually matches the times. It's literally 90s, early 2000s clothing rebranded. I think it depends, because I think that also in the 90s, I can reference a lot of 90s styles that were also styles in the 70s. I think just fashion is cyclical. They just come in different forms. So I think the way that people, you know, match certain things is just different. One time period, it will be trendy to wear, you know, blazers with thick silhouettes. Then it will be thin, and it will keep going in and out and in and out. I think that's just always going to happen for eternity. I think every period has a style. They just come and go. Like, if you think of 70s, you think of like flares, you think of a lot of colors, that like disco-esque vibe. You can think of certain aesthetics. That's why we have, you know, conversations about, you know, the Y2K aesthetic, because we're thinking of the 2000s. We talk about things like the swag era. The swag era was literally a very specific style in the 2010s. Like, swag era was what, 2009 to 2012, where people were very distinctively wearing skinny jeans and studded belts and snapbacks and shutter shades and colorful jeans, and, you know, so nah, I don't know if I agree with that. I think the 2010s and the 2020s also have their own unique styles. Yeah, I don't agree. Like, even now, we have like opium. Like, opium is a very distinctive like 2020s thing, right? 2020s aesthetic. I feel like in 2030, we're going to talk about, you know, the opium period. That's going to be a thing. So I don't know if that's true. I think every time period has styles that you can look at. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.